Hi, I'm Carys the Foco.
And I'm Gary Young.
And this is our new podcast, Over the Top and Under the Radar.
Each week, we'll talk about some stories that we think the media has gone over the top on.
And then we're also going to talk about those stories that we think have gone under the radar, so have been underreported or barely reported at all, but that we think are really important. And this week, we're going to be talking about the general election. It just got called yesterday, and we're recording on a Thursday morning, so this is an election special.
Make sure you sign up to our newsletter at overunderpod.com.
I'm actually a little bit grumpy this week, Gary, and I want to get out in front of it because we had an episode planned, episode 2, we'd done our prep, and then something happened yesterday evening that meant we had to tear everything up.
Yeah, I mean, not least because we came out of last week. I mean, thank you so much for the support and the listening that you gave us last week, which we really enjoyed. So we were geared up. We were buzzing. We were gonna talk all things Bridgerton.
I had some great lines prepared on Bridgerton. We're going to chat about Colin, the carriage scene, and then bloody Rishi Sunak went and called the general election.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. You were going to talk about the carriage scene because I was thinking, is cunnilingus an appropriate kind of topic for this kind of podcast?
It's too early for that word, Gary. Also, cunnilingus. Okay, well, now we're into the carriage scene.
No, that particular incident was not that, but there was quite a lot of it.
Oh yeah. Well, there was a good shot. I mean, we start let's just land that plane, and then we can get into the national election that we're in the middle of already. Yeah, I just think so. For the first drop, I'm not overwhelmed. We watched Bridgerton for a bit of escapism, some sexy rumpy pumpy, and people sort of looking at each other and like that love-hate thing where they're sort of panting a lot. And I just think we've been light on that, Gary, I'm underwhelmed. I mean, there's more to come, but
I intended to hate watch it. The first 2 episodes I'm all up for the multiracial bonking in National Trust houses. I think that's all wonderful. But the way in which they there were these contradictions. One was gender. And on the one hand, it was all courtly and like, oh, I've dropped my glove, Mr. Bridgerton. And, literally people swooning into other people's arms. And that whole thing is kind of around courtship. And then you would get Lord Davenport telling one of the Bridgerton girls how to masturbate. And you're like, we can't have both of those things in the same. I mean, it's the worst piece of mansplaining ever, but also like.
I mean, to be fair, she apparently didn't know.
Well, no, apparently, I don't know.
I mean, first of all, I really do think Shonda Rhimes should give you a call. Maybe you should do the marketing for season 4 because interracial bonking in National Trust properties is, I mean, come on. That's a tagline.
That's what we're there for.
I'm not buying Colin as this season's heartthrob. Like, I get they've given him a glow up. He's got some fake tan. He's got the shirt slashed to the nips. But I'm not feeling it. I fucking love Penelope. Nicola, I think Coughlin. I'm not going to pronounce the Irish surname properly. Loved her since Derry Girls. She's a brilliant actress. I love that she's getting the main stage in this. And she was sublime in the carriage scene. Yeah, I don't know. I don't want Colin to rip my bodice. So yeah, I'm underwhelmed. But something else happened.
So we're not going to talk about Bridgerton. That's the point here. We're not going to go into that because we'd be here all day. But yeah, it intruded on a range of conversations we would have, particularly about the down below action. But then Rishi Sunak turned up, which is as much of a cold shower as you really want.
I mean, there was a literal cold shower. It was so British. He was sopping wet. His suit, what did no one think to give him an umbrella?
Yeah. It's like that scene from Carry On Up the Khyber, where they're all just carrying on eating and the whole place is getting shelled from left, right and centre. But yeah, he landed it on us. In a way, Rishi Sunak's declaration has us sort of starting this week where we ended up last week, more or less. So last week I said, if Diane Abbott does not stand and they replace her with someone who doesn't have her politics, and I said, and this becomes relevant, there are lots of black women in Hackney with those politics, then I won't just not vote Labour, I will actively vote against that person. I will work for that person's defeat. And there were 3 responses on social media, all of which were kind of quite interesting and easily dealt with. The first was, oh yeah, now you're going to let the Tories in. And it's like, the Tories are not going to win in Hackney. So that is not actually true. The second was a weird bunch of like hate followers who were like, oh, so you're only going to vote for a black woman. And I said, actually, someone with similar politics. I'm pretty confident that what they will try and do is present us with a black woman who's got terrible politics and say, there you go. It's the same.
As if it's a Pantone color chart and they're like, there you go.
And the third thing, and the most important thing, is that like there was an offer on the table. Don't screw over black women. Don't treat Diane Abbott, given her service to the party and all of the things she's done, don't treat her so miserably. And if you don't do that, I'll vote for you. Any political party that blames people for not voting for it is already on a loser. That's like you running a store, you're being a baker, and you're running down the road going, why won't you buy my fucking bread? It's wonderful. It's like, it's up to you to make the case for why I should vote for you. So we decided we should do overs and unders about this upcoming election. So, Carys, what's your over the top?
Okay, so my over the top, and I'm like already braced for it. We have quite a lot of it in our political discourse already, and I just think it's going to be done to death in this election, is culture wars.
What do you mean by that?
When I say culture wars, I'm thinking about manufactured moral outrage, and it is manufactured, that is designed to polarize and divide people into 2 opposing camps. And I would say it's generally manufactured by right-wing actors. And it's typically dog whistling or kind of can rattling or like poking at racism, homophobia, transphobia. Typically, I think the thing about the culture wars was they were something that largely happened in America. And with globalization, social media, I think the one word someone uses, enshittification of our public discourse. What's happened with the culture wars, which were typically a very American-centric thing, and we'd all kind of look sipping our tea, being like, gosh, aren't they all so silly? I mean, now everyone from Putin to Erdogan to Rishi Sunak, and I mean, the queen of it is Liz Truss, do this sort of, there's this terrible thing, there's this horrible group of people, and they're coming for you. And I guess the thing that makes a culture wars issue is it's never about the economy. And it's definitely never about the small group of incredibly rich people who have all of the money, all of the land, and a lot of the power in society.
Yeah. And I do wonder sometimes if the left, there is a thin line, isn't there, between we have to resist this bigotry and look, there's a man over there shouting at a car, let's leave him to it. Do you know what I mean? Just let them be crazy. And let's not engage.
Let the man shout at the car. Yeah. Okay. So this is great. You've connected this to the election in the perfect way, because there are a group of people who are benefiting from this. So either the rich right-wing people who fund all the right-wing parties, or the like professional
wankers,
people who get clicks and views from being angry about this shit. And then, yeah, there's probably the rest of us in the middle who are like, is this a thing? And I think the Tories will definitely amp this up during the campaign because they do it all the time and they don't want to talk about the economy that much. And then I think the left will and Labour will fall into a trap, tie themselves into knots. And so we're probably going to get a lot of chat about trans issues, going to get a lot of chat about cancel culture, critical race theory, BLM protesters, Just Stop Oil protesters, basically anyone that Liz Truss name-checked in her recent speaking tour in America. It's a pretty nasty and cynical picking fights that normally center marginalized people. And it's always pretty fucking toxic. I'd say for me, the worst moment was Brianna Guy, the young trans woman who was murdered. Her mother was in Parliament for PMQs the week that Rishi Sunak decided to come at Keir Starmer on the definition of a woman. It's pretty shitty.
Yeah. I mean, I would, I'm not sure that we are in the middle. And what I worry is that people like you and I can get dragged into these conversations that we don't want to have. And the clever thing, which some people manage better than others, is to simultaneously deal with those people or with those issues without being derailed by them. I would rather talk about something else, but there is a temptation when they start going on about this stuff to like metaphorically take out my earrings. And I have to find myself, there is that great quote from Toni Morrison about like racism being a distraction, and that they kind of say, oh, your brain isn't as big. And so you end up running away trying to prove all these things. And so it's this battle of not being distracted, but also not letting it go.
Yeah, you're right. And I think I am, as you know, and anyone who knows me personally will know, I am queen of not even just metaphorically taking my earrings out. True South London girl. And I guess it is partly something that I'm conscious of in myself. I have trans friends. It really bothers me when people weaponize their identity and say that they're not human and make it even harder for them to exist. I don't want 6 weeks of it. Okay, Gary, so you've heard my over the top. What are you worried is going to be overcovered in this election season?
My over the top is that we are about to wander blindly into this poll-driven sort of weird narrative construction of an election where the focus will be on who's going to win and not what is going to change and why it matters. I always find it, and I've covered a lot of elections now, just incredibly frustrating. They're like, who's up and who's down, and not who should care. And then you see them kind of, they exist within the bubble of their own creation. So they say things like, we've stopped talking about whether sending people to Rwanda is a legitimate, morally decent proposal. And we've gone to that to like, when will the planes go? Will you get that done? And then Labour, will you carry on the flight? As opposed to like, why the hell are we doing this? The Sutton Trust did a report a few years ago, and it showed that political commentators were from a more elite group in terms of private school and Oxbridge than senior judges and lords. And so you have this group of people. Yeah, I know. And so you have this, it's a very sort of fetid ecosystem. And the media class and the political class are essentially the same person, which is why you get Boris Johnson, he's got a column, then he's prime minister, then he's got a show, or George Osborne or any of those people, which is why you don't hear about universal credit so much or how Windrush could carry on for as long as it is, because it doesn't affect these people. And the people who are writing about politics are more or less, and sometimes literally the same people who are in politics. And so they have these kind of circular conversations. And really what it does is it breeds a deep level of cynicism, which certainly makes me very cynical. And I think we're about to get it writ large because the Tories have collapsed. What Labour is saying is, well, we definitely won't do what they did, but they won't exactly say what they're going to do. And they're trying to make it clear that there's not that big a difference. Don't be worried. So then what is there to talk about? Well, they're going to cordon off all of this airtime and all of this print space, and they'll just fill it anyway. I am very exhausted even at the prospect of how this is going to go down. I think that they will go over the top.
Everyone knows each other. Everyone is friends, was married. Like, it is annoying. It does mean people have the same conversations. It does mean that they don't have a wide reference point, but also that like most voters or most people who aren't political obsessives are these kind of strange aliens that they're constantly trying to understand through focus groups and like going on social media. That comes through in the coverage. It means that we often have the same conversations about things, and that most people's lived experience just isn't something that the people who are writing about politics or indeed aspiring to run the country know about. Yeah, we're going to have 6 weeks of a small group of posh people talking a lot about politics.
The extent of the kind of anthropology about how they do this. They're like, it's almost like they could send David Attenborough to like areas of the north. I'm here standing amongst the poor. Some of these people are on universal credit. Here's a young scamp who's not in school, like they're kind of alien beings. There are some journalists who don't do this to their credit, but, to the extent that they say things like, but what do real people think, and then they go to a market or so, and it drives me nuts. And the worst thing is that it fails to hold the politics and the politicians to account, and instead becomes mired in this white van man, Gloucester woman, all of these kind of weird construct, like the Red Wall. Where is that? It means places that voted Brexit and abandoned Labour in 2019. But like they make out like it's the bloody Great Wall of China or the Berlin Wall, or that there is a place, there is a wall. And I'm sure the people who live in the Red Wall constituencies don't call themselves Red Wall constituencies, or that the white van man didn't call himself white. There's this projection from these posh people.
And to be clear, like there were some journalists who are super posh that are great journalists and write really amazing stories. And there are some working class journalists. But I think at its worst, our political like culture and discourse can feel like you're sat in at like slightly posh dinner party. And it does make a difference if the person on the opposite side of the aisle is someone who your wife went traveling with on her gap year, which is a real example. I'm pretty sure Ed Miliband's partner went, and George Osborne's first wife, like, did a gap year together. Like, it just changes what the conversation's like. And often conversation's kind of dull. So yeah, I'm over it too, Gary. Okay, well, that's enough of that. Time for a short break.
What's your under the radar?
What I believe will go under the radar during this election campaign, and indeed because of the timing of the election, can be summed up in one not so simple word. And the word is cryptosporidium. Do you know what cryptosporidium is, Gary?
No, you're on your own there, Carys.
Someone on the internet's going to know, and they're going to tell me I said it wrong. Cryptosporidium is a parasite. It lives in human poo and also cow poo, maybe some other animals. And if you have cryptosporidium, you get vomiting, you get diarrhea. It's meant to be worse than norovirus. And cryptosporidium has been found in the water supply of Brixham in Devon. The reason this is my under the radar for the election is I think cryptosporidium and the issue with Brixham's water supply pretty much sums up the conversation we should be having about British politics, but that we won't be. So in 1989, Margaret Thatcher, in her infinite wisdom, privatised the water supply of England and Wales. I'm no fan of privatisation. I would say this particular one, which the Tories floated several times during the 80s, but it was not popular, so they waited until they won another election, and then they carved up England and Wales's water supply and sold it to 10 companies. The company I want to talk about today is South West Water, because that is the company that provides water to Devon, Cornwall, and Brixham, where the cryptosporidium is in the water supply, where 17,000 households and businesses have basically got shitty water. There's poo in the water, Gary, and if you drink the water, you're going to get sick.
So the message here is neoliberalism makes you crap.
I mean, the reason it, for me, Brixham, and there has been some coverage, but really not enough, in my opinion, sums all of this up is it was absolutely bonkers to privatise water supply. You can't pick your water supplier. If you don't like South West Water, and I'm guessing there's a few people in Devon who aren't a big fan, you can't change company. They have the contract. The FT did a really good article about South West Water not so long ago because they are in a sea of absolutely terrible water companies. They really take the cake. They've pretty much halved investment in the water ecosystem. So like in the pipes, in everything that you need to get clean water, to take away shitty water. They've pretty much halved investment since the 90s. And this is the real kicker. They're owned by a company called Pennon Group, one of the few water companies that is headquartered in the UK. 70% of English water is owned by companies that aren't located in the UK. So very little accountability. They're just literally sucking money out of the country and pumping poo into our water supply. Southwest Water posted £126.9 million dividend. People in Brixham are going to get £210 to apologise for drinking shitty water. As things stand, people in Brixham still don't have clean water, but shareholders are going to have a 3.8% increase in their dividend. And Gary, you can't make this up. Pennon Group and Southwest Water were like, the dividend would have been higher, but we got fined £2 million last year for pumping shit into the water. Yeah. So soz, guys, we're not giving you as much money as we thought we would. And like, I don't understand why everyone isn't talking about this. It's like the biggest grift in the history of grifts.
I know. Well, I feel in a way our expectations have been lowered. We expect so little now that we're like, yeah, I guess that figures. But I remember, bearing in mind here, I'm not a young man, Carys. In 86, 87, when I was
young at heart,
when I was doing A-level economics, we were taught some things. Obviously, you can't privatize. Those included gas, electricity, trains, and water. This is an accredited A-level. This isn't an A-level from the University of Patrice Lumumba in Moscow. This is like Stevenage School A-level. And they said, well, some things are essential goods that everybody needs. And then they said, well, the trains, you can't privatize the trains because, well, they have to connect up with each other. And so you need a kind of national organization, the kind of investment. Anyway, it all made kind of sense then, and it still makes sense now.
I know, but what I kind of love about that is that like that was happening. You were sat in a classroom learning some basic economics. Margaret Thatcher and the Tory party were like, hold my beer.
Yeah, I know.
I was like, we're going to sell all of this.
Yeah.
I don't know, two left-wing people talking about the 80s. I never thought I would become that guy. But like what happened in 1989 has directly led to the fact that we can't swim in loads of our water. 17,000 people in Devon can't drink the water. And the bit that really is just like, piss on my leg and tell me it's raining. The water companies have said they'll fix the sewage problem, but they're going to need to bring up our bills. Gary, they have applied to Ofwat to increase bills. Some of the water companies have said they're going to need to increase our bills by 90% to take the poo out of the water that they put in. We're about to spend 6 weeks talking about the future of the country. And because we have a centrist, timid Labour Party and a craven culture war manufacturing Tory party, rather than talking about the fact that a couple of decades ago, we carved up the country to a bunch of companies who took money out of the economy and then make us pay for their mistakes, we're going to be talking about loads of other nonsense.
And it's kind of like piss in my cup of water and tell me it's raining. Do you know what I mean? Like they're just going to drink it now.
Poo in my cup of water.
But also because of the things that will be privileged in this election, there will be people who are like, these boats coming here and wrecking this country, damn it. Give me another cup of poo water and let me tell you how terrible these boats are going to be. Like, there is a sort of weird set of priorities. And you're right, because we should be spending the next 6 weeks talking about the future of the country. That would involve things like we can't drink the water. These things aren't fit for purpose.
The trains don't run. The trains are really expensive and they don't run.
I know. And you're cutting the bus routes, in places where people really rely on it. One of the things that was interesting when Corbyn was the leader of the Labour Party, there were many interesting things, but one of the things that was interesting was the renewal of some conversations. People saying, why do we have nuclear weapons? Or why are we doing it like this? Or why can we not have that? You realise that there were a bunch of questions that had just been parked. So it becomes a question of how can we get less poo in the water? As opposed to like, what the hell is this poo doing in the water? I think these are questions that people would like an answer to.
Certainly the 16,000 people in Brixham would probably like an answer.
I think they would. And I hope that, they have telephones in their toilet so we can call them when they get them and they can take a break from the barfing and the diarrhea. Bless them.
No, Gary.
That's what.
Yeah, bless them. People of Brixham, we're sorry for you. We feel
Solidarity.
You. If I could drive, I'd drive you some water. Yeah. I'd drive you some
from my
water,
toilet to yours, Brixham. We're with you. My under the radar kind of does carry on from that in a way, because I want to talk about turnout and legitimacy. Now, I know from having been a journalist for 26 years, journalists go somewhere, and generally speaking, look out for it when you're looking at the coverage. They'll go with a proposition. Let's say they go to Dover and they want to talk about the boats. They'll meet someone who supports the boats, stopping the boats. They'll meet someone who's against it, and they'll meet someone who's trying to make up their mind. Maybe two of each. They never meet anyone who's not going to vote. They very rarely meet people who don't care, because they've paid the price of the ticket. People will bloody care whether they want to or not. And that turnout in this country has, between the Second World War and 1997, it never went below 70%. Since 1997, it's never gone above 70%. So I would call it a crisis. It's a serious crisis in legitimacy. And I think that the turnout is going to fall even further this year because of insufficient interest and because of insufficient aspiration in our political class. But also what's happened, the votes cast for the two main parties in this terrible first past the post system has also collapsed. So in 1951, 97% of votes went to either Labour or Conservative. In 2019, it was more like 75%. So if you take the fall in the number of people who are actually voting, and then you take the fall in the proportion of those votes that go to the main parties, then you end up with Johnson's Tories in 2019 being elected with just 29% of the eligible vote. Winston Churchill lost in 1950 with 38% of the eligible vote. So you get a decreased, which I think is partly what happened with Brexit. So we talk about Boris Johnson's Tories having a mandate, and I do kind of go back to the Gil Scott-Heron thing. First thing I want to say is mandate my ass. Like, it's 29% of the eligible voters is actually what he got. Now, that's the game. That's the game. So you can't kind of then say, oh, I want a new game. I want a different game. That is what we're up against. But it should inform the way that we talk about it. But I don't think we are going to talk much about turnout and about legitimacy and about the Green vote. We probably will talk a lot about reform.
Oh, we're going to hear so much about reform, Gary. I didn't know turnout had fallen that low. I think one thing we could do is talk about turnout. A cynic would also say that there's one party who are interested in a lower turnout, who brought in voter ID rules when there isn't much electoral fraud, and who called a general election to coincide with a huge football tournament, talking about turnout and low turnout and the fact that the Tories are absolutely fine with low turnout is something that we need to hear more about. And also, you're right that I hadn't. So it's a cute formula of a journalist on tour. So it's interesting, Gary, you've been a journalist for decades. Obviously, you're now a professor, but you're not a lobby journalist. And for those who aren't media obsessives, there's a group of journalists who are the Westminster lobby. They all sit together in Parliament and they are the official political correspondents, and you probably know lots of their names, and many of them do podcasts. But Gary, you write about politics. You were a journalist, and I believe you were once on Tony Blair's battlebus.
I was. The 2001 election, and I'd love to have been a fly on the wall at The Guardian to think, yeah, we'll send Gary on that. Yeah, that would be good. There were three main things that were really weird about it. The first was that you were herded around from place to place. So actually, you saw less than anybody else. You would be in a bus. They always wanted to make sure that you were well fed. But that was not just food. It was also kind of just propaganda nonsense. So that you would be, we're going to Wimbledon to talk to women. Women are important to Labour, and Tony Blair loves women. You'd be spoon-fed this stuff, which was kind of incredibly boring. And they had you, so you would be kind of ushered in afterwards, after Blair had gone in or just before. You were their captives. And that was weird, to be a journalist and be in that situation.
So now I have an image of you being held captive by Alistair Campbell feeding you sandwiches and whispering sweet nothings into your ear.
Yes. Come on, Gary. It's time to disembark. The second thing was that then the lobby journalists, they would kind of gather. Tony Blair would say something completely anodyne, and then they would kind of huddle, and they'd be like, that was a change in his position because in May he said, and it would be like the narrowest. It was like, what are you even talking about? What kind of, he didn't say anything, and yet it's different from the thing that he didn't say 3 months ago. And then the last thing, but by no means the least thing, was that you couldn't poo on the bus. There's been a lot of poo in this episode, but it's true.
I think you're going to need to slow walk me through this. So you're on a physical bus, like a coach that's traveling the country. That's what a battlebus is. And someone said to you that you weren't allowed to poo? Just give me a bit more info.
Oh, it's not like somebody said to me. It was announced to the bus. And I did think, well, how are you going to enforce that? Do you know what I mean? But I think it was an honor system.
So wait, is this when you get on? So there's a group, you are, you're in amongst a big group of journalists, the great and the good, all the big newspapers, broadcasters. You're on a coach like school children. And again, I'm going to make it Alistair Campbell. Sorry, Alistair, if it wasn't you. Before you take off to go to the first campaign stop, someone stands up. Alistair Campbell stands up and says, "Welcome to Labour's battle bus. There's a toilet at the front. No poos."
Yeah, that's pretty much it. But they say I remember them saying literally no number twos. And
they said number two.
Which I then gave me a line that this is the most anal campaign ever.
Did you drop a deuce? Did you do a protest poo? And then blame it on someone from the Telegraph? That would have been a protest too far, even for me. Keir, Rishi, you got a battle bus. Like, Gary's here, man. You could do it. Do another battle bus.
I'm here with
all. He promises not to poo.
With all of my low fiber options.
Okay, so I mean, if you want us to talk about the election, what if you want to hear more about? I mean, no one wants to hear more about poo, but let us know.
Let us know.
How much do you want us to cover it? What do you want us to talk about? Anything you think's going under the radar? I'll never. That's just another beautiful image to add to my memory bank.
Yeah, sorry about that. Thank you so much for listening to the second episode of Over the Top, Under the Radar. Remember to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
And exciting news, Gary, we are launching an Over the Top, Under the Radar WhatsApp community. It is coming soon. If you sign up to our newsletter at overunderpod.com, you're going to get more information about how to join up. Email us at info@overunderpod.com. Follow us on our socials at over_under_pod_.